just received this BBC. It had a leaky battery, which we'll come to later, and no case screws or any screws at all, in fact. So I've put some in just so you can see how to take them out. First of all, I'm going to go around the back, move these two, and this one. Then underneath for these two, doesn't really matter which order you do them in. Can remove the lid. This had a RAM-ROM board in it, hence the mods and the leaky battery. I've washed the alkali off with vinegar, rinsed it with water, cleaned it with IPA, and it's now in the airing cup drying. So that's why I've got no 6502, why these are slightly squashed over, because normally the RAM-ROM board sits here. So next thing to do, take the keyboard out. As I said before, it didn't have any screws, nuts or bolts in it, so I've put these in just so you can see how to remove it. You want something with about 1 inch of thread if you're going to replace it, fairly small bolt. There's plenty of places online where they list the correct nuts and bolts to replace the BBC with. Sometimes it's easier to take the bottom off, sometimes it's easier to take the top. You also need to remove the connector for the speaker. It doesn't really matter which way around that goes, but with the capacitor it'll only go one way. That's with the thin side to the edge. Right, we've got a 1770 disk interface, which you might not have. Doesn't really matter, doesn't affect what we're doing. ROMs aren't as they normally would be, and we'd have the OS there, which it is, and probably BASIC up at the other end, maybe a DFS. So we're missing the 6502, but that won't matter for removing the power supply, which is what we need to do next. These wires usually remember where they go, but if not, VCC red, 0 volts black. Same here, same here, and -5 volts for the audio amplifier chip. So with those out, now I've got 3 screws on the bottom to remove to release the power supply. Just hold it with my finger so it doesn't drop out. 1, 2, 3. It's good to have a little tub or something to put the screws in so you don't lose them. Hopefully we won't lose them. This is the bit where it doesn't look like the plug fits through the hole, but kind of 45 degrees, through it goes. So the capacitors we're going to replace, 0.1 microfarad, 0.01 microfarad, and probably C9 while we're at it. You can buy those on eBay as a small kit. The trick with getting these off is not to try and pull them off like that, but to try and lever against something, or to get a screwdriver, lever it there. The reason you want to lever it is because if you're pulling on it with a pair of pliers, flicking, you'll either hit something, break something, or damage something. Whereas if you're levering, it's never going to go very far. Once we've mostly levered it off, we can do this. Again, we don't want to shoot off anywhere, we don't want to damage anything else, so try and do it the easy way. Don't really need to take this off, but it's easier to get it out if we do. We've got another 3 screws to remove to take the circuit board out, which we need to do. So in that corner, it's got this resin holding it on, but that will easily snap off and release the screw. Put those separate to the ones that were holding the power supply in. Although they're usually easy to tell because they'll be shiny and the other ones will be a bit rusty. Each should have a washer. For some reason that one didn't have a washer. So I guess since the resin hadn't been broken, it's got missed off at the factory. Helps if you've got a bit of a magnet to pull these out. It's my elastic band to make the pliers grip things on their own. And take this nut and bolt out. And remember, nut on the outside, and then there's one of these spiky washers on the inside. Let's do those back up so remember which ones goes with which. Then on this end, if the BBC hasn't been recapped before, we'll find the cable gripped onto there. You can either just cut that off, or if you like the authentic one, you can put a very thin screwdriver up the inside there. Try not to get your fingers. Pop it off and then you can put it back on again later. Probably easier just to get a new one, to be honest. There should be one more bolt, which is nut and bolt, which is that one there. Try and get that off without dropping the bits inside. Right, I have to get a bigger screwdriver for this then. Be alright. Drop the star washer again. There we go. Then to remove the board, the easiest thing to do is going to be to cut that off without cutting the wires. Let's free those. These should be free now. Then we can pop this switch out by pushing its little legs in. And that one, just like the other one, doesn't really matter which way up it goes, but we'll try and put it back the same way it came out, so the switch is the right way up. And we want to take this one out, do the same sort of thing, squeeze its little legs in. Same on the other side. I'm sure there's a better tool for that. Screwdriver works for me. So now we've got that and that. It should just lift out of there easily. Right. So we're trying to remove these two X2s because they're the ones that go bang, and then we'll replace that C9 starter cap because that can often be a cause of the BBC not starting. A good way to find the connections on the other side of the board is if you hold the board with your fingers, you can feel very easily when your finger and thumb are opposite each other, so it's easy to see to find out which two pins we want to desolder. I like to mark it just with a pencil, it just helps me, reminds me which one it is, so I don't have to keep checking. It's going to be those two there, so that's that one and that one. On some boards these are bent right over and soldered flat along to here, which makes them quite hard to remove, but these don't look like they're going to be tricky. So I've got a desolder station, which is going to make this much easier, because it does take quite a bit of heat to melt this solder, because you've got quite a bit of board there, quite a large area. As usual, leaded solder to match what's already on there, and I prefer leaded anyway. I'll just use the gun to melt the old solder around there, melt a little bit of new in, just makes it much easier to melt the old. Same there. And on my capacitor there, marked and I've now lost. Which looks like in there. Make me wonder which one I marked. I marked the wrong one. So, oh no, there it is. So it was that one. Should have marked it better, shouldn't I? So I'm just trying to melt that connection. Got the solder. Right, and the desolder station will work its wonders. Leave it sucking for a couple of seconds after you take it off. Just make sure that that's gone. So that was so quick, it just dropped off the back because we've done both of them. I'm going to clear the holes, the inner holes, because those are the ones for the new capacitor that's going to go in its place. So you can see the legs are close together on the new one. They're the same thing, 0.1 microfarad, 250 volts plus minus X2s. Capacitors got much smaller over the years, so don't be alarmed if your new ones are smaller. That one's actually in pretty good condition, but you can see there's a slight crack there. Take my word for it, within about 10 minutes of use that will probably go pop, and then the machine will smell of burnt capacitor forever. Same on this one. Melt it, little wiggle to make sure we've cleaned all around it. And this one, melt it, wiggle all around, and again we drop it. Just drops out. And then the ones that may or may not be so easy, let's see. These aren't too bad. We can try and get it over the leg of the capacitor if we can, then when we wiggle it round we'll clean out all of the solder that's holding it in. Still on. The solder stations got blocked. I've managed to get my desolder station blocked. Let's pop that back together. Sure we've got the filter central, and carry on. So that should be loose now. If it isn't, you can wiggle it slightly and melt the solder on one leg and wiggle it out like that. Notice the board's got a plus on it, and the capacitor has a minus leg, so don't know why they mark the board plus and the capacitor minus, but the replacement one will go right in there in a minute. So there's the new capacitor. You can see it's much smaller again than the old one. You can get better quality ones than this. This is just one I had lying around that I'll replace later. The original one's 10 volts, 220 microfarads. The replacement one 25 volts. but the important thing, still 220 microfarads. So negative leg, and spread these to roughly the distance the holes are apart on the board. And remember to get the positive leg in the positive hole, negative leg in the negative hole. Doesn't need to go flush to the board, and then I like to pull these apart to hold it in place, but not lie them flat, because that makes it very hard if I need to replace them again in the future. Plenty of heat on there. Same on that one. Just snip those off, make sure you don't burn your fingers. I usually keep those, they're handy for repairing tracks or making short links. That's our C9 in place. Let's do our 0.1 microfarad, which is the one that's got the 4 holes, although we're going to be using the centre holes. Doesn't matter which way round these go, there is no plus and minus. Just you can line it up to the holes, drop it in, spread the legs a little to keep it in place while we solder it. You can put all the capacitors through and then solder them all one at a time. Doesn't really make any difference. Just this way they tend not to drop out when you're not looking. So now we're dealing with fresh new solder. It's a lot easier to get enough heat on the board to melt it. You can see it running, and there we are. These will be hot because they're much thicker, so we won't burn our fingers on them. And finally the 0.1 microfarad, which goes right at the front there, so it's easy to get in. Again, ease them out, hold them in place. Board nice and warm. Wait till you see the solder start to move. A little bit more on there. There it goes. Same on this leg. Get some on there to get a good contact. Let it warm up. Watch it start to move. As soon as it spreads, we're done. Nice shiny little volcano shaped bit of solder. And a little bit long. Not to risk that sticking into anything. And there we are. You can give that a little clean up with some isopropyl alcohol, or you can get medical wipes that are 99% IPA, and they're quite good because they're not supposed to have fluffy bits to come off, so makes them quite useful. And check the rest of the caps while we're here. What we're looking for is to see if any of them are pushing out on the top. That one slightly is, so I'll replace that. Order some spares and replace that. I don't have any spares here, but the rest of these are all looking nice and flat, so they're probably fine. We'll just have a quick look at the board and see if we can see any damage here. Can't see any. These always look a bit funny in their little jackets, but they're okay. Doesn't look any burning there. No burn on the board, so probably not actually had that much use. Now I'll try and put it back together. Probably easier to put that nut and bolt through there first. Star washer. Then a connector. And a nut. This was the one that was tricky to get off, but it's going to be okay getting back on. Actually, it's probably a good idea to put these other screws in first, since they're going to be the ones that are going to be a problem, if any of them are. So various techniques for these. Finger holding the washer on. Do it till it clicks straight. Do it up, not completely tightly, because we might need to move the board slightly to put the others in. This was the one that for some reason, I'll do the more tricky one first. So that was one way of doing them. Another way I find quite easy is to grip it, gripping the washer to the nut head, bolt head, sorry. And push it in. It's a bit tricky with this one because this is my magnetised needle nose pliers, but they work well for taking it out. So I'll try the first method again. Put it in and do it till it goes straight, and do it up all the way. I usually leave this one till last because it's the easiest one to put in. So by now the others have probably fallen out a couple of times. This time we're lucky and they haven't, so you can just do that up. And you can do the others up. Just assembly is the reverse of disassembly, as they say. I'm going to try and do these up tightly, just putting them on so they're in place. Clip that in. We can safely push these in because they can't shoot off anywhere and ping and damage anything else. Doesn't really matter which way around these go, but I like to put brown with red and blue with black as per the way they were originally. Like I say, you can get the cat kits off of eBay very cheaply, or Retro Clinic's very good. Is that the right one? I'll have to check. There's several suppliers of cat kits on eBay. Go and check on Stardust if you want to find out who's the best sort of people to recommend, who is most recommended rather. Put those two straps on there, put the nut on, and the way I do nuts is I'll unscrew it until it goes flat on my finger. If I can't get it flat, I'll squeeze it tight to there and again unscrew the nut till it clicks straight, and then screw it in. Finger tight's fine. The other end, we've done that. Pop this back in. So I've managed to block that hole with for that, so we'll do that. Make sure it's out of the way, do it up again. Just make sure these little clips at the side have popped through and are locked. And tuck these out of the way again. We don't want them getting caught when we put the screw in later, so just tuck them down out of the way. Clear the decks a little. Power supply back in. I'll say this is part of a RAM-ROM board expansion, so don't worry about that. Do the diagonal trick on the plug. Oops, sorry. Diagonal trick on the plug. Just clip that back on there. So if I had any spare ones I would have just put a new one on there, but since I don't have any spare ones at the moment I'll reuse this old one. I'll just screw that on. On this end. Again, we won't do it quite up until we need to. A little more slick. Just find those holes. Same there. And we can tighten it up. Reconnect these wires. -5 volts for the audio. 0 volts in BCC. .0 We don't want it. We want to make sure we get it on the metal and not in between the metal and plastic. And these actually clip on the RAM-ROM board, but for now I'll put them where they would normally be, which should be VCC 2 and 0 volts. And then all that's left is to put the keyboard back in with the speaker socket with a thin plastic on the side where it will fit. Yeah, lining up that notch with that bit of plastic there. Same on the other end. Make sure they're level. These aren't the original nuts and bolts. That'll do. So I'll be taking this apart again soon anyway to put the RAM-ROM board back in. And to give it a proper clean. But in the meantime, I'll stop anything bad happening. Keyboard case. Be quite careful to make sure the LEDs line up with the holes, otherwise you'll bend them over and that won't be very pretty. Good. Keep this together while we put these back in. Don't need to do them too tight. Don't want to break the plastic inside. Into little bits of metal on the lid. Sometimes they slip and you have to realign them, but these haven't, so we're fine. Again, doesn't need to be too tight, just only really stop it flopping around. And that's it. I can't turn it on and show you it working because we don't have a 6502 in there. But there she is, ready to go, apart from, say, really needs a clean.